Okay.
I'll try to speak loudly.
Chase Lanier began producing art to make sense of the physical world around him and his experience of it. He paid close attention to how everything was organized and trained his hand to replicate what he observes. What does this remind you of? It reminds me of the scientific method. It's a systematic process scientists use to gain new knowledge by forming and testing a hypothesis through observation and experimentation. This process is a continuous cycle where conclusions lead to new questions. The meaning of the scientific process is found in Chase's own words. I quote, similarities between the creative process and the scientific process and discoveries in one project find their application in the next, with play being a critical step in the process. There's a lot of cross-pollination between science and art. I remember a conversation we had over dinner after the opening, and Chase's dad was telling us how Liz, Chase's sister, studied science and ended up in finance, and Chase ended up in art. Chase interjected to say that science is an important part of his process. And just look around you. Chase's art is macro, large scale. But after spending time with his exhibition over the past few weeks, his work has a strong micro component. Many pieces look like things one might see under a microscope. Ripple around the corner like the matrix of a leaf. Swath and segment right here like spiky viruses or bacteria. Even Ouroboros recalls the carapace of a snail. Here's the boring part. Lanier completed 2 Bachelors of Fine Arts at the University of Georgia, one in studio art, painting, and one in art education. He has worked in an educational capacity with high school students, pre-K children, and veterans. He occasionally visits summer camps, after-school programs, and museum workshops to share his creative process. He currently teaches art at Academy of Richmond County in Augusta, Georgia. He has participated in juried exhibitions, including ArtFields, where he met Eric LaChance, who was the guest curator of the gallery Chase's piece was in, and Westobou Festival in Augusta, Georgia. He's curated a variety of group shows and shown independently over the last 20 years. Please welcome Chase Lanier.
Well, welcome, Chase, and thank you again for showing your excellent work and for coming here to participate in the artist talk.
Thank you all for having me.
So, I usually ask a question to all of the artists' first things. When did you start creating, and what was your very first medium?
Probably making the art that I wanted to make in high school, and just got a canvas and found some little art supplies that was in my dad's, I think, in college, and just started messing around, and it was fun. You know, so it's kind of explored that just the process of making things.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that about your father. Does he have an artistic background as well?
He's good at kind of representing something as it looks realistically, but necessarily taking it to a completed point, not necessarily. My paintings of his when I was like in first grade to get done in college, and I just found it fascinating that some famous paintings. And so I kind of had these ideas, but I didn't really do anything with it through elementary or middle school really. But around high school, we started kind of getting into this aspect of just exploring how these things fit.
Very good. So you've got a draftsman in the family, and that sort of matriculated its way down into you. Very cool, very cool. So I keep having that on the front of mind now, was sort of seeing the meticulous nature of the work that your father created sort of guide you more toward this free expression abstract work that you currently do.
So he's a very meticulous person. He's a financial consultant. So So he deals with numbers and books and things being exact all the time, and I kind of do that as well, but in a more chaotic manner, and through material instead of numbers. So I think that there is some of that meticulous, detail-oriented activity from him in my work, but
Well, and I think we can all sort of see the meticulous nature in just, first of all, the size of the pieces, but also just when you are able to get really close to it, you can see lots of details that might be hidden. There's pieces of very recognizable materials in these. There's nails, there's nail heads, there's chicken wire sometimes visible. Could you sort of tell us about these man-made materials that you are working with?
So man-made materials are just easy to acquire. You go to, like, most of what I would work with, like Span behind the center, that was back in 2020. I would go to Lowe's and buy nails and buy chicken wire and buy fiberglass resin. The only thing I had to order was cheesecloth as well. So earlier I did the little packs of cheesecloth, but now I'll buy the bulk that comes in like 100 feet of cheesecloth now. But it was just things I could acquire. And you can get multiples of them pretty quickly, and through Amazon you can order most anything you need. So the man-made objects are helpful in that regard, just to solve a need for something to kind of be what I need. And so in that piece, I needed something that was kind of, 1 to 3 inches long, kind of point to it, some sort of a cap, and roofing nails satisfy that. But with the piece in the hallway, I needed that as well, but I didn't want to deal with the weight of nails. So all of the triangular pieces on the walls, I made nails with dowels and paper and hot glue them all together, about $3,000. Yeah. Don't want to do that again. But I mean, there's something fun to it, because when you scale it up, it starts to become this more labor-intensive activity. But the man-made stuff just allows me to acquire it more quickly, utilize it, implement it, put it in place, and run with it. But sometimes it doesn't satisfy my needs, so I have to make money.
And that's incredibly interesting too, because you're coming from being able to readily access these man-made materials, which are mass-produced, and to replicate them in a way that's a little bit more light and easy to like move and put onto the walls. You become your method of production in a way.
I don't want to be a factory, but sometimes you have to be, just don't satisfy what you're looking for in your vision.
And that's sort of the artistic method to sort of touch on science a little bit, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I had to plan it out, and I'm still, I would say, kind of early in my phase of like figuring out how to manage these larger endeavors. And I thought that would take me 2.5 weeks to work on. It took me about 10 months. And so, you learn and persevere. That's been the hardest part, is working on the bigger things, getting partway through and not wanting to do it anymore. Just, it's like you have your vision, you want to make it happen, and you're working on it, and you realize you're halfway through, 4 weeks into it, so you have another 4 weeks to go, and you just keep going.
Well, you see your vision, but you can also see the finish line.
You know where the finish line is. You might not see it, but you know that it's over the horizon.
There you go.
So you just have to keep going.
Just keep on working. And I think this is the perfect example of just persevering and keep on keeping on.
Well, I think it's important when you develop a vision, you go ahead and kind of commit to making that thing happen. Something I have to do is, if I know exactly what something is going to look like, I lose interest. And so I always have to factor in this manner of working that allows me to discover what the thing is in the process of making it. And so, like the Ouroboros, that just kind of flashed in my head. I did a painting of it like 9 years ago, and then I always wanted to make a sculptural version, but I didn't know what it would look like per se. I knew what it would look like, but I didn't know material-wise what it would be. And so that's part of what I have to kind of keep open, is just not knowing certain parts, so I remain interested. But as soon as I kind of feel like I've figured it all out, it will fizzle out real quick, and I'll
So you're coming to these pieces with sort of something in mind of how it will roughly look, but how much of like the end result is left to chance?
Depends. So we were talking earlier, the piece on the end here, on the pedestal, it just began as just like I think that's wisteria. I got vine in my yard somewhere, so I'll use vine to make stuff. Because you can adjust the diameter when you're making your own circles, so it works out pretty well. But that started as just a perfect circle that I allowed to dry around the school. And then after about 8 weeks, I took it off and started wrapping thread around it. It was perfectly round and flat. And as I applied the thread, of course, it was by this tension, it started to warp and bend. Then that became the fun part of it, just to see how this thing responded to my own actions. And then as it went, this is fun, this looks nice. And so that one had no plan whatsoever. It was just kind of a studio music kind of thing. This is kind of in the same vein. I made this thing at one point, and then like 2 or 3 years later, decided I wanted to kind of take that plane and extend it, and that's when I started working with the nails to help extend the plane and then work more cheese ball over it and that capacity. So a lot of them are just using this. Like this was planned. So yeah, this one actually had a drawn out plan. I figured it all out, and I think at one point I wanted it to look like this, but I really love the back end of it, so I decided to let it sit like that. And so just make decisions along the way, just accordingly.
Very good. And I'll just say this: he's allowed to touch the artwork.
You can touch it too.
Well, you mentioned vines and natural materials, so I also would like to hear your thoughts on just the use of the man-made materials, because these are also they're quite shiny, and that's a resin or an epoxy mixture. So you're playing with man-made and natural materials. What sort of brought you to the natural materials and the idea to merge those two?
So going back to about 2016, I had a show about like 7 paintings in the Richmond County Institute of Art in Augusta, Georgia. And that's where the painting of the Boris initially looked like the frontal view, all in black and white. And while I was working on that painting, I was really enjoying the 3-dimensional potential of this vision. And I was like as I'm painting, I'm like, I'm thinking about this sculpture. I feel like I just want to build stuff, right? And so that fall, I did some other work for Westobou and Augusta's Seed show. And I just took objects and placed them in wax and caustic. And I like the kind of semi-transparent nature of the wax. And I really love wax, but it's not very durable. Eventually it's going to get damaged. So the piece in the corner is actually one of the wax and caustic pieces I had done. And I actually attached it to that triangular base sometime this year, maybe. So they've been 2 separate sculptures, and I just combined them together to make something new. But the wax is nice, I like the texture of it, but it's not very resilient. So that's when I shifted over to using fiberglass resin. And I'll just get that Mondo from Lowe's. And I used it for a while, but it comes with like a natural tan kind of color to it. That's why the piece in the middle is so tan. That's just all fiberglass resin. So a few years ago, I started working with the clear resin, like epoxy resin. So that's why you can see the colors more rich and true in the Ouroboros and the more recent work and such. So the natural materials help to impart an organic quality, just in its own shape, form, and give. So all the vines, I work with them when they're still pretty fresh, and they'll begin to dry. But I use enough shellac that I think it's almost like putting a wood finish on wood. And so it won't last forever, but nothing does. So I'm not too worried about the undeniable quality of things. They'll last as long as they're here.
So you're using man-made materials, but also sort of overlaying those over natural materials? Or are there any pieces here where the organic is sort of front and center?
I use whatever I can find. I mean, honestly, the piece in along the wall with the kind of the bulbs, those are all bouncy pit balls that you can order off Amazon. I found a color scheme I like, so I ordered up 100 of them. And I've just got a box sitting there for me to kind of grab them but there's a circle of vine on the inside that they're all like attached and built off of. And then there are other vines that kind of go through to create the dome shape. But then I use skewers. That started because I was just walking through the grocery store and I needed some sticks that were cheap, and so I just grabbed a pack. But now I'll order a pack of dowels that come in 100 a pack, and I can cut them to size as I need to, sharpen them if I want to and such. So the man-made materials are like manufactured because it's still wood, but it's been adapted. I just use what I need, fine, whatever's possible, as cheaply as I can. The vines came into being because I wanted to build a piece that was in ArtFields a few years ago. And I needed rings, but I needed like various diameter. And to try to order those, they don't come in the width that you need. So then I'd have to special order them. And that would get really expensive. And I was cleaning up the yard one day and just kind of made a read real quick. I'm like, this is my solution. And so for that piece at ArtFields, I think I did like 88 of them. And I ran out of vine in my yard, so I just started driving around Augusta. I found this area along the creek, and there were like greenbrier vines going up 40 or 50 feet from the tree. I just go cut it at the base and pull it out of the tree, haul them down the road, put them in the back of my truck, take them home, put them in the front yard, and spend a few days making moves out. So it's really just make do with what's in there. Find something new.
And then, as an artist, I'm sure you can agree that everywhere can be an artist repository. You can pick up materials from all over the place.
No, it's like, I like to be intrigued. I really trust Intrigue to kind of guide what I work on. Many of the ideas that I have, pieces come from just general intrigue. And that's kind of a way where I don't ask too many questions about why I'm intrigued yet. I try to discover that while working on a piece, because if I arrive at my understanding before I finished it, it's hard to finish it. So we all develop tricks to how we produce our stuff. But you were asking about the man-made versus the natural. In the Ouroboros, those are all vines to make the circles, dowels to make the length, and then there's cheesecloth wrapped around thread. And so there are a lot of natural materials, but they're still manufactured and such. Then the resin is being what it is. But I use a lot of shellac as well. Y'all know what shellac is?
Yeah.
It's a wood finish made from the secretions of the black beetle. And it's a beautiful binder. And whenever I kind of build this stuff, I needed something to help just kind of fix it in place, almost like that hairspray. And so shellac is what I use for that. And it also creates a bit of a membrane. So this piece here, a lot of that surface material you see on the outside, that's mostly shellac or cheesecloth. And I think I put flooring wax into that, kind of build it up a little bit, and then went over that with a little bit of resin, but not too much because I didn't want it to be as shiny as this, but I needed to have some added structural integrity to it. So, but I'll use chicken wire and vine as most of the structural integrity of what I build, because it's just already kind of hold things in place. And then I'll use wire, so like wire wrapped around this. Looking around, trying to figure it out. Yeah, I'll use wire and thread. The thread really helps to create tension, and then that tension just adds to that binding and kind of gives it a kind of firmness, so that it will kind of be. So the piece on the interior, got the holes going through it. That entire membrane is just thread going back and forth.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah, so it's just all thread and shellac. Yeah, there's no cheesecloth, there's no wire. There's no resin on that. Yeah, so the one on the end, I wanted it to still have a little bit of a bouncy flexibility to it, and so the resin would just kind of make it a little too firm. So cotton is what I'll use for adding actual tension because it's strong enough. I'll use rayon, but it's just decorative. So I'll just go to Joanne Fabrics and get as many as I can, and get them free. Yeah.
So on a piece like this one,
So then the sine curve happened when the piece warped.
As a result of the tension from the thread going around
I
it,
was trying to
yeah, that's how it got.
analyze this.
Yeah,
You know, you said
so that
it
entire
started out as a flat circle, and then more.
so it's the tension that I brought in. But yeah, that entire kind of membrane is all thread and shellac.
As the shellac dries, does that draw in more, or it's just the thread that's drying?
The thread is what really creates the tension that draws it in, and the shellac just kind of gives it something to help hold it in place a little bit. But yeah, the shellac in my mind just helps to be the connectivity between it all. Just kind of like hold it. Were you going to ask about how much thread went into that?
Well, that's a good question if you'd like to answer it after. My one question was going to be, were the holes that sort of developed a process of just where the intersecting threads were going and then the painting was sort of opening up by themselves? Or?
Yeah, as the thread went across, you'd be left with space in between. And I'd done a piece a few years ago that had those kind of like left spaces, and then I would use let me get the word right. It's not an auger or a weaver. I'd go find one somewhere. But it's like a metal, it's used by plumbers to help open the diameter of a ring making. And so you use the press end, so I use that to help create holes for those and all the pieces in the hallway. But yeah, it's the space left, and then you kind of ream it, and then shellac again, and then it'll start to kind of go back into being triangular, then you ream it again, make it round, shellac it, and then it'll kind of, so it's kind of this process of like building circles. But
So shellac and resin aren't interchangeable. I'm coming from a completely different.
so shellac, if you use it as like a wood finish, you can kind of put it over wood and it's going to seal it, and if you kind of leave it alone, it'll last forever. If you soak it in water while it's covered in shellac, it will eventually kind of absorb that water, go into wood. There's some degree to which it can like protect wood. But in a piece like that on the end, I wanted it to be kind of flexible and soft, so I left it with shellac. This piece here, the large one, it needed the resin to help really make it firm. I mean, that thing weighs 50 pounds.
Yeah.
About 50 pounds of nails in it. And 2 gallons of resin, 2 gallons of shellac. And so
So now you could, isn't there like the solvent that you can use to thin shellac with?
Denatured alcohol.
Denatured alcohol. But I think now with poly, you can use water.
So, piece with the bouncy balls in it, I tried to use a lot of polyacrylic, which is mid-wax and water-based polyurethane, and it works pretty well,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have the same kind of binding and flexibility as shellac. And I've tried a bit because I wanted to get away from using the yellowing effect that comes from shellac, but the polyacrylic just doesn't behave the same way, or in a satisfactory way. And I've got a piece that I was thinking of bringing up for the show that I've been trying to use polyacrylic for, and trying to build it up, and it never hung on. It never helped to really connect everything. So that's where shellac is more useful. But as scale works up, using shellac is going to be less and less realistic because it's just expensive. It's fragile.
Well, and talking to fragility and just the nature of these pieces, there's an aspect of accumulation
Oh yeah.
with all of this work, and you know, not even just the works by themselves, but like individual pieces that you've replicated, the pieces that are on the wall outside, and then the two on the opposite corners of the gallery. I guess I'm interested in your thoughts on permanence. You know, the lifespan of your materials that you're using. You're using man-made materials, which we're living with, like, you know, litter of within our daily lives. But then you've also got the natural materials, which just out of process are meant to decay. And you know, we're also like, there's a precarity to some of these pieces. They're inviting, but then you like get close and it's like a little bit scary and shocking. So where do you place where would you place the idea of permanence within your body of work?
I gave up on archival a long time ago. I used to be very concerned about it back when I was painting. I'd make sure to get some good wood, seal it well, use my oil paints and all the right things, and spend all the time doing that. And I just didn't want to anymore. And just realizing that most people don't care. And I know that collectors probably do care, but I think most of these, if you take care of them, will last someone's lifetime, potentially 2 or 3 lifetimes. But I think anything, if you leave it in a hot storage unit in the summer heat in Georgia, so, I mean, I figure in the sense of most things being archival, they're going to put it in an air-conditioned space where it's climate controlled. I think these pieces will be fine. But if they collect dust or they get damaged, we have to deal with that too. And it's just that idea of permanence. Things are going to pass. That's just it. So the piece in the corner, I'd actually dropped it off at a place in Augusta where I work, and I went by to get a picture and for an art show submission. They were taking a picture of it, it kind of starts to tilt over, and I'm trying to catch it with my foot, and it puts a hole inside of it. And so I'm like, crap, I can't really make the hole make sense. I can't like be able to through this. So I took it home and I was apprehensive about trying to fix it, but I fixed it. It worked. I was very happy about that. And so I like to try to retain pieces if they get damaged, but I'll turn them into other stuff as well. The piece that was in ArtFields, if I went to ArtFields in 24, I had a piece in Jones Carter Gallery that was like 11 of these giant tubes that were all kind of bound all together. I cut up one of those, and that piece in the back is actually made from one of the sections from one of those tubes. So
It almost looks like a cocoa pod.
yeah, some sort of like seed pod thing. And
A smoked turkey leg.
yeah, I think it definitely looks like a cooked piece. But that piece was so large, I just didn't have storage for it. I mean, that's a practical thing. It's just too big. So when it was done at ArtFields, I separated all the tubes from one another, threw it back in my buddy's truck, and we drove back to Augusta. It got completely wet on the way home. And soaked my entire storage, but that was nice. But while making those pieces, I really fell in love with the material. I know every one of those tubes different from one another. I didn't want to throw them away. I didn't want to destroy it. But I wanted them to kind of perpetuate themselves. So on one level, one way, nothing's permanent, but then you can still carry things forward. And so that's a big part of what I enjoy about anything is nothing's isolated. Everything is connected and ties into the next thing and you move forward with it and such. So I think there is a permanence to it, but it's permanence in the perpetuation of the idea.
Another question, so, can shellac or resin be outdoors?
I wouldn't do it.
And the question was, can shellac be outdoors?
So I missed the whole storage unit in the Georgia heat. A few years ago, I had to put stuff in storage for a summer. And I had a piece, I thought about bringing it here, but I didn't. But while it was in storage, it was laid flat, but it was resin. And when I came back 2 months later, it like drooped down. And Parker was like, darn, and the other part was like, possibilities. So this piece actually sat in a mailbox on my front stoop for about 1.5 years, in the hopes that the heat would allow it to kind of break down a little bit more. So it did not used to be so kind of smashed down there, but as it was out there, it's definitely more brittle than it should be. I think that's just 1.5 years of sitting in a metal box. But yeah, it's not exterior. Yeah, I think about the times of making proposals for public sculpture and such, but I'll have to discover other materials to work with, unless they want the thing to deteriorate, which I am interested in. I had an idea for a public sculpture in Augusta along the canal where I would gather up bricks that are just like along the canal and build this like giant kind of bowl, and then throw all sorts of seeds on the inside of it, but use a mortar that's not a great mortar mix so that it kind of deteriorates over a few years. But it would also be surrounded by these like long poles of denim fabric because there used to be textile mills in the canal. But but they'd be tied together at the top with a thread that obviously UV is going to break down, so that over a matter of a couple of years, eventually it would just kind of open up like a flower, and then eventually the mortar would dissolve and the bricks would fall apart. So I factored in this entire idea of Intrigue, but the entire thing just falling apart. I didn't get it. They went with a proposal to move rocks to make a shape of a boat. That's not going to go. I still want to do it, but it's just convincing somebody to let me put something that is going to fall apart.
Yours definitely sounds more intriguing.
You know, that there are public art that is specifically, you know, yes, natural materials, and they're really made to deteriorate over time.
I need to find those people. Yeah. I know that there are some like sculpture parks where they'll have like installations that are meant to like, yeah, they're going to deteriorate. So I should look at that. That might be where I get to do what I'm doing.
Well, and so that's a good jumping off point. Would you like to share with us any of your influences or any artists who? Because I'll just share one thing. Your use of resins and epoxy sort of bring to mind Ava Hess, and like so beautiful, and then sort of like a tragic life. So I hope you are wearing respirators when you're making these things.
I typically work with a fan blowing from behind me, and I work with all the stuff in front of me for the most part. Just so that it goes away from me. But yeah, I wear respirators.
But ventilation, that's number one, that's key.
I went to my ENT last week, and she said everything's good. But as far as influences, yeah, seeing Ava Hess's work, just the organic material, the way that she was able to just create these things that felt alive. There's kind of doing the thing. Louise Bourgeois.
Okay.
Bourgeois. Big spider. It's like all these things. Just, I look at that and like, that makes sense. And I can't even tell you any other thing. I just look at it and it makes sense. Give me a second to find his name. I'll talk about it now. What that thing called? Phil Augusta. So despite being a painter, his use of the material, like the materiality of the paint, kind of constructive stuff, Van Gogh, same type thing. And I think that even when I was younger, I was gravitating towards like sculptural painters, painters that have the materiality that really shows off in the work. So that would be the California artist, about 96, part of the Bears Gallery. He had a quote of seeing is forgetting the name of the thing you're looking at. And Robert Urban, so Bob Urban, and a lot of his work was about perception, and just the way we, like how we see. And so I was predominantly a painter up until about 2015, 2016. That's when I started dabbling in sculpture. And sculpture gave me the opportunity to create something that had multiple experiences available. Oftentimes with painting, it's just there, that's what you get. And so I like the idea of the sculpture being in the space of the viewer, being able to move around it, move into it, see it from far away. But at the tail end of my painting period, I also had to reconcile that I was not doing a very good job of connecting with my viewer, because I wasn't considering my viewer, which is a very odd thing for someone to say who's making art. But I'd made it about 15, 20 years and hadn't thought about that. I finally started to realize that I should probably about the viewer's experience. And so I started reading into very base level, like semiotics and just the way sign works and how we communicate. And so I started exploring that within my painting work. And it really got away from recognizable imagery and just got into shapes and kind of forms that I felt maybe represent what I'm thinking about. And then I really got into just the brush stroke. The brush stroke became interesting. So then I made sculptures that looked like a brush stroke, but it became sculptural and there was stuff embedded inside of it. And I just took it off from there and started to fly. but still, with a lot of these works, they're pretty simple. I mean, that's a ring, it's a circle, there's nothing too complicated about it. So I like this idea of having a minimal presentation with a maximalized presentation. So the surface of everything, that's where the detail comes into play. Like, when I was working on this one, I love this edge so much. Like, it's just so gnarly, there's so many little details in it. It's almost like looking at a piece of fabric that's been torn instead of cut. You can see how the fibers are like reaching out and how it alludes to what else is going on. So for me, materiality has a lot of kind of a stand-in for the way the materials interact with one another. To me, kind of gives it a lot of the meaning of what's happening.
So the emotion that you're going for now, from your viewers, is sort of just to take the entire piece in.
Yeah, when I was working on a painting back around 2014, I was using a buddy's shed as a studio, and I walked up to the truck to get something. I put the painting outside, kind of have a look at it. As I'm coming back, I looked at the painting, and I could see the lines that I painted, but I couldn't see the image that was kind of in there. And I liked how you got a different read from a distance, and then as you walk closer, you start to take another read. So as you get closer, you see a new version of it. And so I really like that idea of rewarding the viewer with this continuing exposition of the piece as they get closer and closer to it. So if they invest more time, they discover more of the process. And so when I craft work, I try to think of it in that sense. Like this one, I really wanted it to be viewed from a good distance. So you see it one way, and then as you come up closer, you start to realize that it's not as long as you think it is. It's just flat today. If you come at it from the side, it's like leaning forward, like it's almost going to fall over. I really like the idea of things always falling outside. It's kind of an ongoing theme. But it's that precarious nature. It's the fact that some of these look as though they're like ambulatory, kind of moving along, and kind of gives it that like maybe they're alive kind of thing. But they're just objects, and they're not doing anything, so sitting there. But kind of having this idea that they're almost frozen moments in time. We were looking at the piece around on the other side of the wall, and I like the sense that it almost feels petrified. But the petrified tree used to have bark, wood on the inside, and everything else, but now it's rock. And so it's still a tree, it's just a transformed version of that. And so I like the idea of these having a certain kind of flexibility and materiality to them, but then they can become frozen as well. So
This piece especially has such an elegance to it.
okay.
I love the way it is displayed with the light, and it's just by itself on this wall. So it really has, and you're right, far away, it's really impactful, but also up close when you notice the texturality of the piece.
That one started by working on the piece that got in ArtFields. Those two circles were too big, so I just had them sitting across the living room, sitting on the couch one day, and the way they were seated, overlapping, it looked like a foreshortened tube. And so I just took the two and I put dowels between them to create this shallow depth that would feel as though it was longer from a distance. And it just worked over it. And so that's a piece that it wasn't planned, it wasn't developed, it wasn't an idea. It was just kind of a recognition of a possibility more than anything else. And so that's one of my processes, is just pay close enough attention to be intrigued and see where it takes you. And then other pieces get organized and planned out, but a little bit different.
Am I missing that piece that seems so different from everything else we've done?
Plaster. So it does have chicken wire on the inside, but it's like a layer of chicken wire, cheesecloth, shellac, wax, plaster, and resin. And so that one was really kind of a studio experiment. Kind of wondered, like, how can I make these things?
I thought it was clay.
Yeah, it's, I really wanted to, I wanted to have this, like, it shouldn't be what it is. Kind of
Yeah.
thing, you know, I mean, you pick it up, it's like 5 or 6 pounds. But I really enjoyed these two things kind of spinning, almost like whirling dervishes off of one another. And it was also kind of fun, like, how can I create this thing? So there's like y'all want to know how it's going to go?
Yeah,
Yes.
tell me about it.
Alright, so there's just an all thread piece of rod in there with a couple washers and nuts, but then I just hit them on the inside so that you don't see it, but it's bound together. It's 2 separate pieces that were joined. But yeah, I really wanted it to have this kind of spinning, dancing quality, but it's plastic. Everything else in here is, I mean, it's fragile. You can drop it, it breaks. But everything else has more of a flexibility to it, and that one is very fixed. So I like plaster, it's just so heavy. So yeah, I try to move away from making heavy work, but like the piece that was at ArtFields is 8.5 feet long, 8.5 feet tall, 5 feet across. What did it weigh?
Not a lot, not a lot.
25, 30 pounds?
I think 2 people were able to move it,
Oh,
and
I mean,
one couldn't even move it.
I can pick it up alone, except it's just too long, right? Like, put 2 people together, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's maybe 25, 30 pounds. But it was gargantuan. So I like the idea of them playing, I like playing, this is fun. And play around with what people's expectations are, and switch it up on them kind of thing. And so when people see something of that size, they think it's this behemoth, big, heavy thing, and then push it over.
You know, even the piece in ArtFields had an organic quality, like anonymity.
Yeah.
And a lot of your pieces have an organic quality. And it's, I don't know if it's ironic that they're made with almost completely artificial materials, but yet they have very organic.
I think the process gives it the organic quality more than anything else. But the one in the middle is mostly man-made objects, but your Boris is all actual materials, some of them manufactured in some way. But the process of putting these things together, I think, imparts a lot of the organic quality. When I started painting in college, I liked the idea of being able to take a painting and just like throw it off in the woods and fit. Even though it's not a picture of a tree necessarily, but that has like a natural quality to it. And sculpture allowed me to explore that even more. And so I feel like I can take any of these pieces and throw them off in the woods.
I feel like that reads pretty clearly. Like Karen, it looks to me as a person that's really into sci-fi.
Okay, yeah.
Like it has. Karen mentioned earlier, like it's macro, but it's got like the microorganism quality to it. When I came in here, and when I came in here this morning with kids too, they had a very similar reaction about it, just feeling like you're stepping place in like an alien world. Like these all feel organic, they feel alive, but they feel not of Earth. And I feel like that kind of like comes into your like, materiality, like it's like the kind of like shiny sticky quality of it makes it just feel very like natural, like something that was created and produced and formed by processes that we don't have necessarily here on this planet, but on another planet we could, like, I know that wasn't the intention, but like with the whole like, toss it in the woods and it fits, and it does, but it also like feels like you could do that like in some fantasy world.
Like send it off to an alien planet.
Yeah.
Well,
And I like
sure.
that.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Well, yeah, if I may, sort of to pick up on that, there is this balance and tension and also like parallax that you're describing, where you're sort of seeing things from a distance and our brain wants to describe it as being longer than it is, but this piece, for example, you get up on it and it's like, it's very compressed and short, where from a distance, if you're walking through this entrance, it might look like
For
it's
like
a tube.
for like a split second, you read it as if it's this.
Precisely.
Kind of like get around and like I like the idea of someone's brain almost you can feel the moment like it's not what I thought it was, but it's okay. You know?
Well, and sort of to further that, you're very accepting of people's interpretations of these pieces. So could you sort of talk to, we had discussed Wassily Kandinsky earlier just today, and just sort of the idea of semiotics, which you touched on earlier, and what emotions, what would you like viewers to see in this work? And also sort of answering Zoe's question here.
Ultimately, I mean, I think all artists want certain response to the viewer. I want people to have an authentic experience. I want them to kind of discover something, maybe about themselves or the world, whatever. I'm not very explicit about anything. I think that the work is very, not vague, but open.
It's open to interpretation.
Open to interpretation. And that's important to me. I think that we all have our different experiences in life. And for a while, I did not use titles because I'm like, I need to test myself to make the thing, to be the thing without the words. That works to some degree. But I also like to use a word just to help kind of propel the viewer into a certain consideration. And then what they do with it at that point is kind of up to them. I love using words that have multiple interpretations. So you have something like span. There's just a lot that can happen there. Severance. I think there's something to that going a few different ways. And then you get explicit like the Ouroboros, but then the Ouroboros itself has a lot of embedded stuff with it. I have to trust my own process to kind of remain true to my experience and what I want out of it, because it's not just about the viewer, it's about my experience making the work. But then I have to realize if I want to put it out in the world, I need to consider to some degree how people experience it, but not what they experience. As far as my intention behind them, I don't always speak to that, and I don't really think that you have to. I really hope that my work, this has been the challenge for myself, is to create work that hopefully lands in the viewer somewhere near the intention that I want them to get without me pointing at it. My last show was titled "Don't Point," avoid pointing at the moon. It's rude. It's actually based on an old Zen koan that if you point at the moon, they'll only see your finger, and so they'll miss the wonder of the thing up there because you're over here saying, "What? What am I doing?" And so I want people to discover just by stepping in and creating that experience. And so I strive to create work that has this wondrous element to it that you almost have to wonder about. I could be more explicit, but that's not fun. I like creating that little game, that little moment of discovery.
Overall, the way I said it, if I heard correctly, you said something about any extension to being intrigued. Could you unpack that?
So, Span, I was just up in the mountains, and just like, it wasn't the mountains that I was so in love with, it was the valley. And just the way that these spaces just curved underneath. And so, the piece is not so much about, mountain valley, as it is just about that curve, and just finding that curve. And so, allowing myself to take that beautiful experience I had, and be like, I'm going to carry that curve into a work of art that I made, and then I'll deal with it as I may. And so, that was that. Door Horse, I just literally turned the light out, put my head on the pillow, and I smacked my head with it. Sat up, did a quick little drawing, like, that was something. And I went back to bed. This was just getting intrigued with the way these circles sat together. And if they had sat 2 inches over this way or 2 inches that way, it would have never happened. But it was in just that moment where I just happened to put them down. I was like, huh, what can I do with this? House around the corner. I feel like that one stretches back to a painting I tried to do back around 2009. And it was somewhere between a house like that and a grandfather clock. But it was more about just that kind of form. And at that point, the grandfather clock was like sliding off a cliff. I was like, this is fun. Painting went somewhere entirely different. I never really had closure on that kind of initial vision. But then 2 years ago. I was just sketching one day and I did this drawing, like, that reminds me of this thing. And so I did a quick drawing and I was like, that's it. And so that was a sketch. It took me about 1.5 years to get around to making it. So I made that this summer. And I usually never make stuff that looks necessarily like a thing. So that house feels like a kind of major departure, but it gets back to like what drawing, like that would be what I'm drawing. It's just like a fun little architectural thing. So the stuff in the hallway, that was really specific to the space. I wanted to, once Karen told me I could use the wall in the hallway, I was like, oh, okay, what else can I do? And so I made that piece specifically for the hallway. And I kind of sat down, I went through a number of different ideas, and I realized that the length of the wall, I couldn't build a thing that could just be like moved here and put inside on the wall, just be too large. And so it's like, well, let me create something that's modular, something that has like components that can all be interchangeable. And so I made about 100 or so of those triangle things, and they're all identical, but they're all unique. And so I really like that idea of the shared identity of a thing, but the individuality of each piece. That's important for me. And so that factors into how I design things. And that was just, I went through about 3 or 4 different ideas. I had one idea that I would have a thing on the outside that was kind of like a drop of water hitting a big ripple. I think that's kind of where the ripple came from. But that what you'd see on this side would be the drop coming through the wall, and then also hitting that wall, so that what happens here passes through the entire space. But that was going to be way too much. So I had to tone it down. And
I'll make 3,000 wooden nails.
tone it down, right? And so, but it was just a matter of like allowing myself to just bounce around. Now I've got a sketchbook that I keep, and I've got ideas that I'll never make that are in there. I might go back to them 20 years from now, but that's a lot of it. Keep a journal, keep an idea, look at what you do. But it's a matter of paying attention to that intrigue. And I think the hardest part is realizing your authentic intrigue versus what you think would be trendy intrigue. I think people sometimes gravitate towards what they think people need to see. I recommend avoiding that. Just stick with what you are individually intrigued with, and you'll be fine. But it's just a matter of paying attention. I taught photography at a local after-school program about a decade ago, and I'm not a photographer per se, but I know how the camera works. We got a good time. But we went out and we take walks, and I told the students, like, when you're walking and you see something that you like, take a picture from right where you're standing. Don't try to get a better picture, because you were intrigued from that moment that you saw it. So accept that intrigue, use it. And then what we found is after the kids had like taken 5 or 6 photographs and put them up in the hallway, you could see each student's individual style. And it wasn't because we had the idea ahead of time, it's because we just remained true to the process and we started what we did. So, yeah, remain focused on your intrigue. Way better.
Stay curious and be intrigued. That's great words to live by.
So, I'm wondering if the pieces that you made, especially the one out in the hall and the ripple, is that the most colorful that your work has become? And if not, or whatever, have you ever considered working with bright colors, but that may be not possible with resin?
So my paintings were colorful. Yeah, definitely have some paintings, they all work fine. Getting into sculpture, I've been making up as I go. I mean, I don't think these processes, they don't teach these in school. But it became necessary just for the vision that I had. And so I then had to work with the materials that I found to kind of help that vision. And so, that thing being tan is what it is because of shellacking and fiberglass resin. Those are the colors of it. What I discovered is that I can add alcohol dye to shellac, because it's based in denatured alcohol. So that's the way that I impart color to that. I'll also use thread, like in your works. That's all basically dark thread. It's lighter as it moves around. So it goes through. I think it 14 different colors of the red in there, so they're all just kind of tightly bound. But I'm up for other color, and yeah, I would say Ripple is probably the most colorful thing I've made in years. And part of it's just that the resin dictated that things would look that tan color. But after a while, I get tired of people saying, is it meant to look like skin? And it's not. And so it was a matter of like, well, I need to reconcile this. Like, I need to manage this to move away from this possible interpretation that is a little too much, like too many people are getting that idea, and it's not what I intended, so I'll have to make decisions to move away from certain things. So,
I love the fact that in Severance, I believe you use like orange thread.
yeah, so all the color at the base of that is all based on red. And so then there's shellac over top, and the shellac kind of saturates the thread in such a way to help kind of bring more light to it. It's not dissimilar to when you're doing oil painting and you're mixing the oil with the paint and you create these layers and the light hits it, bounces around, refracts, and helps to illuminate the color. The shellac works in a very similar way. The resin as well. The resin more so. It's actually a thicker layer of the light that bounces around the side.
So it doesn't dull the color to use shellac.
Shellac to a degree. Like once you hit about the third or fourth layer, the kind of tan effect and the yellowing starts to come into play. And that's my kind of moment to decide, am I going to lean towards this or that? Because if I need to put more shellac in, I have to find a way to incorporate color to avoid that skin.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're into the audience question portion
Okay,
already. So
right.
if
Yeah,
there are any more.
I appreciate the questions though. That really helps make it more
Yeah, it's more of an interactive conversation.
Yeah, so if there's any other questions from the audience, please feel free.
yeah, that would be alcohol dye. And you know, the surface of this one is also pretty heavily different than anything else. These are dryer sheets. Like used dryer sheets. I was like, it's a membrane. And so I just like started stockpiling them and then getting them using them. I will say that the like Johnson & Johnson ones is easier to work with because toxicity probably. The natural ones, the fibers break apart and they're not as toxic. So it's kind of like, I don't use dryer sheets myself, but you know, whatever you get.
And Johnson & Johnson is going through it right now, but I do know that their floor wax is like,
Oh,
I got like one can at my house. It's been discontinued. If you go on eBay, they're like going for $200.
oh my God.
I know, so I'm like, maybe I gotta sell this. They discontinued it. The type in the tin tub.
You can get it loads of times.
Yeah. I don't know why they discontinued. I can only imagine something bad.
See, I like to slap stuff on the cracker.
It really helps the
So I use finishing wax in that one to help kind of shine up the surface. The middle one, use wax on that one. Okay. Once you put wax on, you can't put anything else. So that's I've learned a lot about the sequence of material, how you add them. You can add certain things, and you can't do anything past that point.
So where in the layering would you use wax?
Last.
Wax.
Yeah, because it's just
And why would you use it? Is that- is it-
to build up a sheen.
Sorry?
To build up a sheen. So the centerpiece there, big triangle, that's all floor wax. I actually took a buffer into it to really kind of build it up, just to help give it a uniform kind of shine.
And what's different about the shine from the wax and the shine from the shellac and the shine from the resin?
So the shellac is still going to be susceptible to moisture and humidity and things like that. It's not a very resilient surface. It's kind of shiny. The more you add to it, the shinier it gets. It's just not resilient. The resin, so your boards, that's all just resin on the dark end, and I use less and less of it when around. But it's fine. It's got enough shine. If I had used that resin on this piece, probably would not have added the wax. But it was also just kind of what happens if we use the wax. Still in that phase. It's like, what's going to happen?
Well, you had touched on it earlier. I'm sorry. I am curious about the house piece because it is such a departure from the rest of the pieces in here. And in a way, you know, we do have other recognizable forms, the Ouroboros, but also this cone here. I'm wondering sort of, you mentioned that it was based on an original painting, and
It was more kind of a fixation on the grandfather clock, and you know, I've seen enough of those growing up, and it's just odd to have a giant clock. People don't typically have them anymore, and it was just a cool overall shape, and so it's again allowing that intrigue to just kind of reside and be its own thing, and the house fit that kind of icon. And so within semiotics, you've got symbols and icons and index. Icon looks like the thing that is. Symbol does not look like the thing, but we all know what it represents. The index is just the result of action. And so I think the materiality and the way they all mesh together becomes the index of the work. And I don't really like symbolism, just because it's too easy. I think that's what it is at the end of the day. But I love the idea of iconography and using an icon that possibly can be interpreted a few different ways. And so then people look at it and they bring everything that they've experienced with that thing into it, whether it's good or bad, but it's all authentic and genuine. And that's what I'm really trying to kind of get at, is creating that thing. And I think everybody's familiar with the house.
But you know, the house is almost like that's the pathway into your work in some ways. For just an audience that is.
I think you mean this show? Oh yeah, I think that's probably more accessible piece.
Right,
Yeah.
and so, you know, it's the first thing a lot of people see, so it draws them in, and I think it allows for contemplation of the other pieces. You know,
I was aware of that and kind of thought about that. I think had that piece not been here, it would have felt even more alien across the entire space. And so because I think that piece still looks like it's a cousin of all these. And, you know, in its tilt and the kind of chaotic base of it and such. But yeah, it's a house. But it doesn't have any doors or windows. Like, that was intentional. And I wanted this thing that's kind of, it's like up there. Makes sense to me.
yeah, I mean, in a way, it reminded me of that painting Nighthawks, where it's just the cafe,
Yeah.
and like you're looking through the glass, but there's no
Look, this
point
is,
to enter this place or to exit it.
oh, I never noticed that didn't have a door. That is-
There might be a door to like
But
the
like,
kitchen,
you can't see it.
but like there's no entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I'm sorry if you'd like to go to point.
I don't know your secret. You're a full-time teacher with all the creativity that involves and energy. How do you find time to be creative when you work?
So, I have a studio at home. It's just a bedroom in the house, and I made a studio. That's where Door Wars was made. My dining room is my auxiliary studio, so it doesn't have that many tables. It has tables for stuff. But when I was working on the pieces for the hallway, I knew I was about to hit production. So I have summers off. That's my big production. As a teacher, I have summers off. And I was not able, I could have made everything at home, but it would have been a nightmare trying to organize it and manage it. So I went to my principal about 2 days before the school year ended. And I was like, I was on the way out one day, 4:30, I was like, hey, I have an art show coming up. Would you mind if I use my classroom this summer? He's like, sure. And that was it. And so basically, we graduated all the kids, we submitted our grades, and the next day I started moving everything in. And I made my classroom introduction run for the entire summer. And then I still was not done when school started, so I'd have to set up my room to teach. And then on the then in the evening, I'd like set up in an area, and then on the weekends, I would rearrange the entire room to be a production area for 48 hours, and then clean it all up and put it away and get back to teaching. So,
What a positive thing for the students to see a working artist at work and it's their teacher as
well,
well.
most of them had no idea any of this was going on because I'd leave no trace. You know, it's like you set it up the same way that it was on Friday, and the kids had no idea. But some kids, like, if they were busy over the summer, they might come by, like, what are you doing? I'm like, making art. I'm like, what are you doing? But as far as energy, I don't sit down. Like, this is the most I've sat down. In a long time.
Just be creative to get the original ideas.
Oh, okay, you asked about the secret. This is something I tell my students. Creativity, in my mind, is more just saying yes to a possibility. And I love to take two seemingly things that should not be together, mashing them together, and find the connectivity, find the way that they can be related. And so, like our Art 2 class, I hate telling people what to do. I hate thinking for them. And so I've got a stack of cards that we play Pictionary with, basically. I'll just draw 3 cards out, and like, okay, you gotta make a picture with these 3 things. And then, I mean, it could be like a whale, an ice cream cone, and a envelope. And you have to make something. You have to find a way to validate all these things and share reality. And so I think that's the basis of a lot of creativity, is just saying yes to that possibility. And I keep a sketchbook. I get an idea. Sometimes I'll write an idea down and I'll get really fixated on it, and the next day I'll sit down and I'll plan out the entire production of it, like I did with this piece in the hallway. Yours wasn't really that planned out, it kind of cobbled itself together along the way. Nothing else really happened. The house had a plan. Yeah, the house kind of had a plan. I created measurements, I kind of calculated how much wood I need, and I ordered it, and I prepped everything, and I sanded edges, and I got all the stuff that I needed. And so, but then that plan was made a year and a half ago, and it just sat in my book until I was ready to start working. And then I go to look, I review everything, and start working, realize that I was naive about something, and I can go back and restart some parts of it and such. But secret's just saying yes. Yes to a possibility. The intrigue is the biggest thing. And trust yourself. That's one of the biggest problems with the students is they have these ideas of perfectionism, and they also have doubt. And it's probably the result of so many people in their lives telling them that that's a bad idea, that's stupid, that'll never work, why would you waste your time, you can't do that, someone else does it better. And they've just been worn down. So they show up in 9th grade and they got nothing. So I have to spend all of my time working with them just to give them a small little bits to be successful at and begin to find this thing and just give them just the next step. One of the possible titles of this show was something like, I'm going to find a way to not sing the phrase, but there's a verse in the Bible that a friend of mine shared years ago. I'm not a big church person, but I grew up in it. But it's like, may I be a lamp upon your feet. And I was like, why do you like that so much? He's like, well, think about the lamp, especially 2,000 years ago. It's only going to be a flame. How far can you see ahead of it? Just that next step. And so that really resonated with me, not wanting to make a plan. And so you trust the process. And so you use the lamp to see your next step. And as you move forward, you see the space for the next step. And so just really trusting that process of moving forward. And that's all you can do, is just take your next step. And eventually you'll kind of build up a momentum and then you're rolling. So it's really about getting started.
I think that was an extremely good final word, but we will take one more question.
No, that's what I was gonna say. Does anybody have, yes?
Yeah, I wanted to mention something. When you mentioned selection,
Yeah.
as a child, we will go there this year. As a child, my first experience with shellac was very simple. My father was a jack of all trades.
Okay.
He was born in 1923. He and my mother got married in 1947. The home that they lived in was built by him and his dad. Anyway, check this out. Years ago, I was like a third grade. Daddy put down some hardwood floors in our home. As a child, I knew the beauty of that hardwood and wood on the floors. I didn't say anything, but I watched him as he came home from work. He was laying down different parts of the floor. I said, that's so beautiful. Then he said, I'm going to put some shellac on it. I didn't know what the word shellac was. I tried to spell it. But then S-L-E And he laid down that shebang. And that track, we couldn't walk on the floor at that time. We had to go around. And the shine of it, the gloss, the beauty as a child, I appreciated the beauty that that shellac added to the already beautiful flows. And so as you were speaking about shellac and how you made this stuff, you know, and put on it, and I'm looking at it, listening of the light, I look at the light shining down on the piece, and it adds to, okay, now check this out. 31 years ago, our youngest child, rather, is 36 years old. This is my husband. 36 years old, we had Aisha. 31 years old, she was like 5 years old. And I was cooking something with flour. I don't even remember what it was. I was cooking. And so all of a sudden, she was watching me as I was cooking. She was putting her hands in the stuff. I said, let's make something. We made, and I have it right now on my dresser, a worm made out of flour and water. It's like a plastic.
Still have that? It's not from the party.
Did you seal it with the shellac?
Check this out. And we had some color, like egg, or you say egg. And so we were making this worm, which I have right now, and corrected it and took some yellow and green and purple egg coloring dye. It was so beautiful. So I'm wondering whether or not, I don't want to mess with that. It's so rich, so
Right.
whether or not shellac on that worm would help to even edify and raise up the beauty of it.
I don't want to be responsible. I've just thrown anything. I've ruined artworks just trying things out. Potentially. Does it have any internal structure to it? Does it lay flat?
It lays flat, it's flat.
I mean, you could spray something around it. Probably even put resin over it if you wanted to, but you have to manage it.
I would not suggest resin on a natural material like that, because it'll just mold.
Well, it should be dry enough at this point, 30 years later.
I guess.
Yeah, it should be. I don't know. You mentioned your dad with the shellac though. My mom's dad, he was kind of a jack of all trades. He had a little shop in the back of his garage, and he passed away before I was born. But he used to love to do decoupage. So he would like create like wooden purses and then put patterns around and shellac everywhere. And so I never met him, but I would see these objects around the house and such that had this beautiful golden glow to them. And I don't even know why I originally picked up a can of shellac. It was in college. I was working on a piece for an art education class. We had to like create. I think they wanted us to create like our own kind of sacred object for space. And I created this like square with another square with an oil lamp I got from my grandmother. And then I went and found some bamboo and cheesecloth, and I created this kind of tower going up, and I shellacked it. And I don't know where I got that. My mom never mentioned shellac to me. I was probably walking through Lowe's like, what's that? And just used it. And then come to find out years later, I'm really glad that nature didn't catch on fire. Because shellac is flammable. That piece that's burned over there, that was not intentional.
It was leftover.
It looks good, but I was trying to just like trim off some edges with a torch and a spray bottle of water, and it just went. And so it burned for about 45 seconds before I could put it all out. But no, shellac just has a beautiful quality to it. I mean, there's nothing like it.
One more question.
Yeah.
Let's say my dad planted a tree. He said he was in the first grade. So it must have been in like 1929. Planted a tree, and it subsequently over many years grew up to be a big thing. And years later, that tree was cut down, and they cleared out some land. And I have a part of that tree
Yep.
at our home. You know, that thing is, I have it in the garage right now. And I'm wondering, and it's so beautiful, I could not leave there. I was born and raised in Savannah. I couldn't leave that spot without having a part of that tree to carry it home with us. So we have it home. So I'm wondering, again, back to Shenak, whether or not Shenak that part of that tree is.
That's different. I would say yes to that. I would sand down everything and make it super smooth, get it to the state that you want it to be in. Does it still have the bark on the outside?
Yes.
How long has it been since it was cut?
15 years.
Oh, okay, so it's dry. Yeah, the main thing is it just needs to be dry and such. Does it have cracks through it?
Yes.
I mean, it'll help hold it. But, I mean, if everything's kind of dry at this point, I'd recommend probably sanding it down smooth, just to get a nice even surface. And you can probably brush shellac on. For the outside being textured, they have cans of aerosol shellac that you can use.
Put that on the bark.
Yes.
I would put it on there just to seal it, because eventually that wood will continue to decompose and it will eventually break off. So putting the sealer on will just buy you time more than anything else.
If you want something less permanent, mineral oil rubbed in would be a great way of just making it more luminous. And then you still get the texture of the wood and everything, because the shop is like a hard coating, which if that's what you're looking for, is a great option. And like as you mentioned, it improves the structural integrity. But if that's not what you're interested in, and you just want to make it more like luminous, and just bring out the natural color more, just rub in the mineral oil.
I think the mineral oil would actually bring out the wood way better than shellac. Shellac is superficial, but the mineral oil gets in and
Yeah.
enriches the wood.
It absorbs, and it helps keep the piece, like it helps with its longevity. If you do the mineral oil like once a year, every other year, reapply it, because it helps bring the moisture back, keep it from like crumbling over time.
But yeah, I mean, wood's going to disintegrate. But, in time.
It's all cellulose.
Yeah.
Everything is sugar.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chase. And thank you